Greetings. My name is Cowann Owens. I'm an LCSW or licensed clinical social worker. That means I am able to operate as a therapist. I currently work at the VA of Louisville, the Shively Seabach. Um, I also have a private practice that I work at, Graven and Associates, where I see civilians and children. I've had my LCSW now. Well, I've been a social worker for the past 12 years. I've been operating as a therapist for close to 9 of those years now. Started off in the PCWCP program, which is Public Child Welfare Certification Program. So I started off as a CPS worker, Child Protective Service worker, in Trimble County for about 4 years. From there, went on to become a therapist at 7 counties, which then became Centerstone, then became 7 counties again. But I worked there for about 4 years. Became a middle school counselor at West End School for a couple of years. Went back to 7 counties to become a supervisor for about a year. During that time, I was also acting as a therapist in the private practice I mentioned earlier. Um, and after about a year of that, I had the opportunity to come to the VA, which has always been a dream of mine. It's always been a big career aspiration to work with veterans. I haven't served myself. I was in ROTC for 4 years, and I always had the dream and the ambition to serve in our country in this capacity, but it never came to fruition. So, kind of my consolation prize is to be able to work with veterans. The majority of my career, as I mentioned, has kind of been working with children. So I'm really honored and impressed to be a part of this documentary because of the work and the effort that I know you guys are putting into making this a pivotal part of history, to be able to document and show all of the things that we're going through, the progression that we're making through this time. On a personal level, I've been married for 11 years and have 2 children myself. They'll be 8 and 10 in September. Um, so, as far as being a father, being a man, I can't say that I'm more proud of you guys for what you're doing as far as the efforts working with Tatiana. I'm also a member of Keepers of the Torch, which is a group where we're trying to kind of see what we can do to make our small part to make a difference in our community, specifically in West Louisville, but in Louisville as a whole. So I was born and raised in Louisville. Went to Murray State for my undergraduate degree, went to U of L for my master's, um, and I really enjoy and feel passionate about having the opportunity to help other people using my talents as a therapist. When it comes to what we're facing right now, I believe that most everything boils down to attitude and perspective. Um, One of the interventions that I use as a therapist is called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. In CBT, I believe that what we're doing is pretty much breaking it down simply is we're figuring out the relationship between the thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. If you really break that down in simplest terms, and this isn't something I learned in therapy school, this isn't something that I learned from the VA or 7 counties or anywhere else. This is more of a Cowannism. I wholeheartedly believe that the only thing in this world that we truly have control over is our actions. Um, Many people are familiar with the serenity prayer. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So if you think about that, it's a fancy way of saying, please give me peace to accept the fact that there's some things I don't have control over in my life, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that wisdom to know the difference is so important, to be able to figure out what do I have control over and what don't I have control over. We don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over how other people treat us. We don't have control over what other people say to us. We don't have control over the things that anybody else does or any other actions that others take on us. As far as I'm concerned, our feelings don't operate like a light switch either. So I can't just make myself happy. I can't just make myself angry. I can't just make myself sad. I believe that, and I can't also just plug thoughts into my head. I can't make myself think anything. You know, if somebody does something to somebody else, then they're going to have a thought as a response, and as a response to that thought, they're going to have a feeling. Now, the choice that we have is what action do we do with that feeling? How do we control that feeling? How do we manage ourselves? I don't believe that anger management is a true theory. I don't believe that you can truly manage your anger. I believe that you can manage your actions. And over time, there's coping skills and things that you can do to hopefully improve your mood. But none of it works like a light switch. It's all a process and it all takes time. I believe that in the current time and age that we're in, It's really important that we're mindful that everybody has their own perspective. There's a part in the brain called the reticular activating system. It's a filter system that kind of helps us to determine how do we see the world. Do I believe this cup is half full or half empty? You know, it's all about my perception. A lot of times my perception is going to be programmed based on my self-image, based on what other people say to me, about me, how I feel about myself, um, my attitude toward things. Henry Ford said a long time, whether you think that you can or you believe that you can't, you're right. What that means is pretty much if you believe that you're able to do something, you can. If you believe that you're not able to do something, if you're not confident enough in yourself to do something, then you won't be able to do that. Uh, if we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, we're always waiting for things to happen. The reality is that we live in an imperfect world full of imperfect people with imperfect policies, imperfect governments, and imperfect situations that arise on a regular and consistent basis. So if you're waiting for bad things to happen, there's a 100% guarantee that bad things are going to happen. If you're focused on good things, then there's a 100% guarantee that at some point something good will happen. It's not that positive people have more good things to happen to them or that negative people have more bad things to happen to them. It's a matter of their focus. It's a matter of what they see. So I think it's really important as we think about the current climate of the world and what we're going through and the times that we're in, that we consider that there's not really a black experience because not everybody's experience is exactly the same. So my experience, my perspective, how I see the world is how Cowann sees things. The way that somebody else sees it is the way that they see it. So there's not this homogenous dichotomy of just everybody feeling and seeing exactly the same thing. Everybody's perspective is different. Even if we can empathize and relate on certain levels, there's not the world view because my image of the world is different from anybody else's image of the world. So I think that's an important reality we have to be mindful of as we navigate like what we're dealing with is that there's not one sole truth. I think that's why mental health is so important because we sometimes live in this bubble where we believe that the world is an awful, terrible place. But I think the reality is that it's an imperfect place that we need to continue to work using our actions because that's the only thing we have control over. As I mentioned, I was a child therapist for a long time and still continue to be. There was this printout I would always give my kids. It would say, it's okay to be mad. It's not okay to be mean. Everybody has feelings and we can't always control those, but we can always choose our actions. And then in big bold letters at the very bottom it say, I am the boss of my behaviors. One more time. I am the boss of my behaviors. Now that means that again, sometimes people feel depressed. Sometimes people feel anxious. Sometimes people feel worried. Sometimes people feel scared. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed. Everybody, probably by about the age of 3, has felt pretty much every emotion there is to feel. So on some level, although I'll never be able to relate to exactly what you've been through and you'll never be able to know exactly what my life experience is, we can empathize with each other. We can join with each other. We can connect with each other, but that requires a certain level of vulnerability. It requires us taking our armor down so that even though we might risk harm, that emotional exposure is what vulnerability is, but you can't let any of the good stuff come in by constantly blocking the bad stuff because you can't filter, you can't differentiate between what's good, what's bad, and I want to let the good in, not let the bad out. Because when you numb, you can't selectively numb. You're blocking it all out. So I think it's so important that we come together, we as a people, and not just brown people, but all people, and we learn to empathize with each other. We learn to connect with each other. We learn to be compassionate with each other. We learn to love each other. But the first place that starts is with loving ourselves. And you can't truly love yourself if you don't understand yourself. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's this pyramid, right? If you think about the bottom rung of that pyramid, we have our physiological needs. So that's like water, food, shelter, love, the things that we need literally to exist, to stay alive. We have to have all of those things. Once we've established that bottom rung, then there's four other portions that we go up into. So once we have established that, then we go up to safety. We have to make sure that our safety needs are being met. Once our safety needs are met, then we start looking at connection, our need to connect with other people. Once that's met, then we start looking at esteem. How do I see myself? What is my self-image? Usually, that's a lot of times based on your connections with other people, as far as how you're relating in the world. The highest peak of that pyramid, which most people don't quite honestly get to, self-actualization. That's kind of the goal. That's where I've pretty much achieved all that there is to achieve, and I've become the best version of myself possible, and now it's time for me to pay it forward. I believe that we as a society, we as individuals, we owe it to ourselves to take our mental health carefully, to take it seriously, so that we can make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. It's like the old adage says, if you're on a plane and the oxygen mask comes down, if I'm so concerned with trying to reach and put the oxygen mask on you, then I might just pass out before I even get it to you. So if we're constantly trying to help everybody else in the world, but we don't take that oxygen mask and put on ourselves to put us in a position to reach out and then help you. My dad used to always say, charity starts at home and then is spread abroad. Because if you can't take care of yourself, if you don't take care of your own needs, then you're not going to be able to survive or sustain or be any good or of any use to anybody else. That being said, I know I threw a whole lot at you guys, but I just want you to be mindful of the importance of self-care, the importance of being able to love yourself, to be able to take care of yourself and each other, because it's so important. The goal of all this is to improve our world, but we can't improve our world if we don't have individuals within our world that are living up to their fullest potential. There's, I think, of Marianne Williamson, she had a poem that it discusses the importance of not belittling yourself to the world, for not playing small. You owe it to the world to be the best version of yourself and not just trying to minimize your talents, your gifts. And we all have talents and gifts. We're not all equally yoked in the same way. Some people might be more physically strong. Some people might be more intelligent. Some people might be more crafty. Some people might be more artistic. Some people might be better speakers. Everybody has their own gifts and their own talents and their own unique things to bring to the world. And we all have our own unique perspectives, because just like our lungs all breathe air, and our kidneys all filter waste, our stomachs, intestines all digest food. We assume that everybody's brain works the same, but it doesn't. If I were to ask you to visualize a beach, somebody might be able to see palm trees, somebody might describe the sand, it might be in the first person view, it might be from the third person perspective, some people it might look like a painting, some people it might look like a movie in action, some people it might look like a still frame, some people it might be bright and vivid, some people won't even have to close their eyes to see it, and some people it's kind of grainy and they can barely even make it out. Some people have aphantasia and they can't see anything at all. But that to me says that everybody's brain is so different, it's so unique, and that is such a powerful thing to know. Because just because my brain might be operating on Windows 10, your brain's operating on DOS, somebody else's brain is operating on Linux, somebody else is an Android, somebody else is an iPhone. Every brain operates on a different system. So if we sit down and we watch something, my perspective, my takeaway from it might be completely different from anybody else's. We might see some commonalities, but the reality is that my perspective, my truth is my truth, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. I wholeheartedly believe that most people in this world are well-intended. Most people are doing the best they can. Most people wholeheartedly want to do better and want to do what's best for the world. But the reality is that sometimes my definition of good versus your definition of good might be different. I often like to give people this exercise and say, look, if we're in a room and I ask you to count all of the green things, and I give you 30 seconds to do that, then and then 30 seconds later I say, all right, how many red items did you find? You're going to look at me like I'm crazy, because you're looking for the green items. I've asked you to look for the green items, and then I ask you how many red items there are. Well, see, the reality is that it's not that there's not any red items, but when you're focused on the green, you're going to find the green, and you can count the green, because again, that goes back to our reticular activating system. because our reticular activating system is focused on what it's focused on. If I believe that I'm an awesome, wonderful person, then I'm going to have the confirmation bias to support all of the evidence that says, Cowann, you are an awesome, wonderful person. If I believe that I suck and I'm just no good at anything, then I'm going to find all of the confirmation bias to assume that to be true. I'm going to find the evidence. It's called catastrophizing. When we're looking at the things that we love, the things that are potentially good, and we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're waiting for the not so awesome things to happen. We catastrophize. We have a tendency to do that. It's just human nature. But again, the nice thing is that through visualization, we can reprogram our reticular activating system. So I want to encourage all of you guys. This isn't a sales pitch. I'm not saying that you need to get in with me for therapy or anybody else in particular. But I want to wholeheartedly encourage you to take time to invest in yourself. Do better for yourself. Whether that's exercise, whether that's finding coping skills, whether that's finding outlets that are good for you. For me, although I'm a therapist and I love spending time with my family, my outlet is pro wrestling. I'm actually a pro wrestler. Some of you guys may or may not recognize me, but I'm Big Zo from OVW. So that says ZOVW. Which I know is very different from my actual occupation as a therapist. But that's what I do to help me to feel good. So finding an outlet, some way to being able to express yourself artistically, creatively, or whatever it is, find an outlet. I think that's so important during these times, to be able to feed yourself. If you're not getting good rest, you're not getting proper exercise, you're not getting good health, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you're trying to go out and save the world and be a superhero, then you're not going to be any good for anybody else. All right, so I know that was a bit long-winded and loquacious, but I hope this is helpful as far as giving you some insight on kind of my perspective, the way I see the world. And again, not everything I say is perfect or right. Again, it's just my opinion. It comes from a professional basis. It does come from going to school for a while and having some background with it, but I'm sure that there's probably still some things that somebody else could disagree with. But my main takeaway is keep loving yourself, keep loving others, do the best you can, and let's work together to make this world the place that it should be and the place that we deserve it to be. Much love to you. Have a great day.